All of that stuff is what I file as it seemed like a good idea at the time. Hey guys, we're back with Moto Stories with Unkie Phil. Now, I get a great amount of joy from this stuff because I get to tell stories that my wife would normally cut me off on so hard. Like, you ever get that kick under the table? You're saying something and you're like, this is a good story. I think the room would appreciate this. And then your wife checks you under the table. That's the kind of stuff that I'm going to bust out for you guys a little bit. There's a saying that says, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. The problem with that is, though, if a story's not true, you can't retell it because you get a bad memory and you forget all the facts and stuff and the way you embellished it. The good news is I've had some weird stuff happen. I've had some good stuff happen, some stuff that's not so good. And some of it has led to really, really fun stuff that we like to, maybe around the campfire. So if you can, imagine a nice campfire right here. Maybe a tire thrown on for good measure, just to give it a little atmosphere. And then maybe somebody doing something unnatural to a motorcycle in the background. That'd be cool too. So that's a lot of what my environment is when I'm having a good night. And then pour yourself a bourbon, just a little one, maybe 4 or 5 ounces. And then take a good long draw and then go, okay. So this one time we went to this place, this racetrack called Summit Point. And Summit Point is in West Virginia. And it's really close to DC. Like, it's almost respectably close to DC. Like, people who work in DC can live in the area around Charleston, West Virginia, and commute into DC and have real jobs. But Charleston, West Virginia is a little banjo, there's a little bit going on there. And this racetrack, Summit Point Racetrack, well, I got to meet this place in like early 1994 or so. And it was a place where you went out and it was a good grassroots racing organization and they welcomed everybody there. And if you had a racing organization, you could race on Summit Point. And well, there were parts of it were rough, I'm not gonna lie. And I knew some of the guys like Dean Middleton that were just really good at that track and they understood that track and they knew the carousel and they knew how rough it was and they knew what part of the line to hold so they could not die, right? But guys like us would go out there and we'd right? And we just run off into nowhere. And it's a good track though, but like most tracks, like most good old school racetracks, they're not built for comfort. They're built for speed and endurance, right? And so you get to these tracks and it turns out if you can find a bunch of like-minded individuals and you can pay the $35 or $25 to get onto the track for the weekend, there's no better place to camp. They've got it all. They got a little track store. They got all kinds of cool stuff. And no matter what weekend you go, they'll be racing old cars or old motorcycles or sidecar rigs or whatever decided to show up. And the group I was familiar with and the group that I would run with back then, there was this group of guys and they're called the Soul Survivors. And the Soul Survivors, they were a scooter community out of DC, and they also kind of had the band called the Pie Tasters, kind of in the middle of their group. And this is when the ska scene was getting to that point where it wasn't just drum circles and getting in the middle. You might get punched in the face once or twice too. There was a little bit of element of aggro coming into the ska scene, and some of the songs were about drinking too much and falling down or driving home when you shouldn't. There was this fun element of that, and all these guys who were our rock and roll heroes were also into the bikes that we were into. And they would have an RD350, or they'd have a cool old vintage bike, or they'd have a couple of Vespas and Lambrettas in their garage. And we would show up at Summit Point, and our friends from the Boston Bombers Scooter Club and the Soul Survivors would set these things up. And it was a great time. You'd get all these scooter people together, and there's motorcycles racing on the track all weekend long. Well, what's better than waking up to the smell of two-strokes being ridden by absolute amateurs and motorcycles being wadded up in the carousel 40 feet from your tent? That's heaven right there. And they have those little turrets, those little crow's nests everywhere where the cameras would set up if people were actually paying to see the race. But otherwise, you could get up there and just get baked and just watch racing happen at 8 o'clock in the morning while you're sitting there watching your friends wake up making bad decisions with their girlfriends or their friends' girlfriends. And this is what we would do. And we would burn stuff. And people would bring motorcycles that would get abandoned at their shop. And, you know, when a motorcycle gets abandoned at a shop, in most places, you can forget about ever getting a title for it. And they'd bring these bikes out, and we would just systematically destroy them over the course of the weekend and just dig giant pits with the back tire until the tire exploded. And eventually, the bike would be pushed into the fire with the throttle wide open. For the record, a Honda Shadow 500 will last about 45 minutes in a raging bonfire before it melts down and dies. And it will give you a lot of respect for the Honda Shadow. As much as you're like, Honda Shadow, whatever, I don't want anything to do with that. A Honda Shadow in a raging bonfire will run for about 25 minutes. And everyone's like, oh, the gas tank's gonna explode. No, I've watched. The gas tank will burn like a Zippo lighter, but it won't explode. But when those tires cook off, it's like the second coming, man. When those things go off, it's like a bomb, and it blows logs out of the fire. It's very cool. And so back to Summit Point, you know, this is what we're doing. We're having a good time. But this one year in particular, somebody decided it'd be a good idea to invite the Crows Motorcycle Club. Now, I'm not saying this is a 1%er kind of gang thing. You know, your rocker's got to be so far low and whatever, and you're a patched in member or whatever. But this is a good Washington, D.C. group of people that's kind of centered around the Crowbar. And if you know about the Crowbar, well done. If you don't know about the Crowbar, well, you should have lived back then. It was better, I swear it, I assure you. Now, these guys showed up in their pickup trucks and their Harley Davidsons and their Glory and their fringe and their tassels, and it was awesome. And they brought in pickup trucks with kegs and kegs of beer and ice and everything, because this was a motorcycle rally. And we're not going to pay attention to those scooter guys over there because they're, you know. And I said, this is great that these Crow guys brought us all this beer. And they're going to be really angry later when we take all of it. And it turns out that in every instance I've ever been in my life, and that includes Chillicothe and various other motorcycle rallies, the scooter people do work a little harder. They put in the time, they put in the effort. I think they've had a harder lot in life choosing that vehicle as their main conveyance. You do pay some dues when you make that your choice. You have to learn, if somebody calls you a you get off the bike swinging your purse at them with extreme violence, and not be afraid to take a man down, because you've made a choice to ride 10-inch wheels and two-stroke, you know, that kind of a thing. Now, what nobody keeps in mind is that a lot of us have 1,000cc six-cylinder motorcycles at home, and we do all kinds of different motorcycle endeavors. But in this particular case, all these Crow guys and their black leather worship society and their, you know, legit motorcycle lifestyle, they all came out and they'd set up their tents dutifully as they do. But the thing is, like, we don't do that. We don't need to. We're going to be awake until the sun comes up. And when the sun comes up, well, we may go to sleep wherever we fall down, or we may take some stimulants or something and make the day just keep going. A good day lasts about 3 days at a scooter rally. You want to get it rolling on the Friday and keep it rolling until Sunday morning. And if you can stay vertical until you get the car in the driveway Sunday afternoon, well done, sleep for 2 days. You've earned it. Now, what had happened here in this particular case, I did mention the pickup trucks full of beer, didn't I? Well, those were left unattended. And I believe that the intention was that any beer that didn't get drank might be able to get returned. And we looked at that as like a personal challenge. And we had been yelled at several times by the doctors and lawyers in black leather that were sleeping in these tents over there in the, you know, in the shape of motorcyclists, in the shape of Harley Davidson enthusiasts. And we had decided it was our goal to empty their campsite of all items of value that could be consumed into our bodies, and we did. And I think that means that if somebody left a bag of Doritos on the table, those were gone. It's true, we were like raccoons it was insane. We were in a feeding frenzy. But by the morning, well, when the sun came up, we had a bike inside the lavatory, like in the bathroom, a bike sitting on its back tire on the toilet, as though somebody had interrupted it mid-deuce. We had somebody's bike up in the crow's nest. Nothing was where it was supposed to be. And we had consumed all the consumables. That's a good party. Apparently in the middle of the night, somebody had taken their liberties with the track. So you know the rules are you're not supposed to ride on the racetrack. That's for racers only. But apparently some of our guys had got it wild hair and they'd gone out on the racetrack in the middle of the night, which by the way is the only way to piss off a race course. That's the one thing they're really weird about. And yeah, some of our people did go out and they did abuse the track at 2, 3 in the morning with their little Vespa and Lambretta scooters. You know what? It was fine. Everybody raced the next day. Although we did get an announcement over the PA saying, you know, somebody's left their scooter in turn 7. We can't do anything. No practice can start until that bike gets moved. I had nothing to do with that. All of that stuff is what I file as it seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, we did go back. They did invite us back the next year, which proves you can always push it just a little bit further. So maybe next week we'll talk about sometimes we pushed it just a little bit further. If you like this stuff, check out our podcast at Cleveland Moto. You know, it's not just me, it's all my friends. We get together, there's 6 or 7 of us. We drink so much, we have some snacks, we talk about motorcycle stuff. Basically, it's just biker guys doing biker stuff, really. That's what it is. Moto Stories with Unkie Phil is really just about living life a little bit better through a weird hobby, through something that we're all into that we can share with each other. It's a fireside chat, if you will, again, but you have to provide the fire. So just imagine that fire right there. And folks, remember, ride fast and take chances.